words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be always acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. My dog, Dursey, is a Vizsla. His breed is known as the Velcro dogs because they want to be attached at your hip every moment of the day. And they're prone to separation anxiety when they feel apart from their human. So when Dursey was about 8 weeks old, I began training him to be separated from me by leaving him in a kennel for 45 minutes. A blink of an eye to us, but to a puppy, an eternity. The kennel had comfortable bedding, toys, food, and water, all the signs that Dursey might know that he is loved and that all his needs will be met. And on day one of our first test, I latched the kennel and drove into town to get some groceries. 45 minutes later, I was met in my driveway by my neighbors. They had been inside their homes, listening to my dog inside my home howl, bark, and yelp for 45 minutes nonstop. I explained the training program that we were doing, and I persisted. A week later, I increased our separation time by 15 minutes, and the neighbors who lived closest to me went camping for the weekend. Last week, we heard the story of Abraham and his firstborn son, Ishmael. This week, we heard the story of the first child born to Abraham and Sarah, Isaac. These two stories are presented back to back in Genesis, chapter 21, and then chapter 22. They should be read and interpreted together because they are intentionally parallel stories. In both stories, God is testing Abraham. God had entered into a covenant with Abraham and Sarah. You might remember Sarah giggling at the promise God makes, because though she was barren and elderly, Yahweh promised she would bear a son, and Yahweh would bless her son. But it didn't happen quickly enough for Sarah. She began to lose confidence, and so she convinced Abraham to have a child with her servant, Hagar, and that child was named Ishmael. The first story, Genesis 21, is known as the sending of Ishmael. Sarah tells Abraham, the girl and the boy have to go. So Ishmael, still a child, is going to be sent into the desert. And Abraham believes that Ishmael and Hagar will die in the desert. He's very upset. He loves these people. God responded to Abraham's despair. Do as Sarah says, because Ishmael is your child, I will make a nation of him. So Abraham sends Ishmael and Hagar into the desert. The second test of Abraham, today's reading, is known as the binding of Isaac. After the birth of Ishmael, Sarah and Abraham do have a son together, and he is named Isaac. Yahweh tells Abraham to take his only son, whom he loves, to a faraway mountain. And there Abraham will offer his son as a burnt offering. Abraham gets up the next morning and begins the journey. The firewood is stacked, Isaac is bound to it, and Abraham is about to do the deed when God finally intervenes. During the first 3 weeks of my dog's training, when I would get home and open the kennel gate, Dursey would pour himself into my arms, whimpering, as if he was saying, please don't go away, please don't go away. But a curious thing happened in the 4th week of our training. One day I came home and opened the kennel gate, and the dog bounced into my arms, started licking my chin, tail wagging a million miles per hour, and he ran to the door, rang the bells to tell me he wanted outside. And then he went to the flower pot where I keep a tennis ball for playtime, and he brought it and dropped it at my feet and began his Dursey dance. Throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball. From that day until today, that is the greeting I get every time I come home. Over the course of our training, the kennel never changed, and my behavior of going and coming never changed. Each time I left, the dog was surrounded by all these signs that he was loved and that his needs would be met. And each time I opened that kennel gate, I would love on the dog like there was no tomorrow. What changed in week 4 was Dursey's response to the experience. He grew in trust. In Genesis, there was a change in Abraham's behavior that piqued my curiosity. In chapter 21, the sending of Ishmael, Abraham is very emotional. He's distraught. And Yahweh is presented as being very compassionate, assuring Abraham that Ishmael will be okay. He will become the father of a nation. But in the second test, the binding of Isaac, Abraham shows no emotion, none. And there's no compassionate assurance from Yahweh. God calls to Abraham 3 times in today's reading, and each time Abraham says the exact same 3 words, "Here I am." Something happened between chapter 21 and chapter 22. Abraham was changed. He no longer needed God to reassure him that all would be well. When God called Abraham, his only response was, "Here I am." And then he began walking toward the calling God was placing in his life. Like Abraham and Dursey, we are tested on a regular basis. Dursey learned through trust. He learned trust through this consistent relationship with his human, but Abraham learned to trust Yahweh through experience and faith. Usually the tests we face are kind of little things, but sometimes they're big things, and every now and then they are life-changing events that we can only comprehend through faith. We don't know the future for ourselves or our parish 20 years from now or even 20 minutes from now. But we do know that God surrounds us at St. Christopher's with signs of God's love for us. God is present here in us and through us. There is so much hope in this place, you can feel it. Hope isn't buried in the walls or the pews or the flooring. Hope is inside you, and it is inside me. We are signs to the world and to one another of God's hope and God's love and God's peace. Every time St. Christopher's meets a challenge with those 3 words, "Here I am," we are changed. We grow in faith and courage. This is a place where holy boldness is chosen and lived. We are ready for whatever is next. Throw the ball, God. Throw the ball. Here we are. Amen.